Apart from God himself, love is the greatest gift God has given us. But like all things that are given to us, we can pollute them and distort them until the image that was originally presented to us does not resemble the original at all. We have taken the true love of God, what God has given to us, this sacred gift, and because of our sinfulness as human beings, we have smashed and twisted it and conformed it into something we like, something that makes things easier on us, and what is left is not love at all. We have placed love in the hot fire of our sinfulness and forged it the way we want it, and what comes out is no weapon. But we as Christians are called to take what God has given, forge it into something different, use it in the way that God properly has given to us to wield, a weapon of love in our world. We desperately live in a culture and a society that needs real love. This is what 1 Corinthians 13 is urging us to do, to place biblical love into every relationship we have, first and foremost with our brothers and sisters in Christ, and then the world at large. To take every other gift that God has given and place it under the umbrella of love. Letting love ooze into the recesses of our being, to ooze into every single crack and crevice and gap and hole that we have in our lives, so that when we are put under any kind of pressure, love oozes out of us. Now, last week we looked at the first two descriptions. Love is patient, love is kind. But then Paul goes negative. Paul gets negative. We're still in verse 4. After mentioning the two positive descriptors, he goes to 8 things that love is not. 8 things that love is not. So I asked myself the question, why so quickly go to what love is not? I mean, he only names 2 things that love is. Love is not. Love is patient, love is kind. Now let me stop right there and just mention a whole bunch of things that love isn't. Why the switch to the negative? Well, let me tell you what I think is being done. Paul, first and foremost, understands who he is dealing with, namely human beings. Human beings who are prone to sin and walk in the flesh. Galatians 5, written by Paul, tells us, do not walk in the flesh, but walk in the Spirit. So Paul knows that all of us have this temptation, even Christians, this temptation to go negative in our actions. If we walk in the flesh, we're going to live in a negative way. Our flesh is weak. In fact, in Romans chapter 7, Paul says, there is nothing good that is in my flesh. When we attempt to live positively for the Lord, trying to pursue love, to make our love patient, to make our love kind, there will inevitably be a rising up of our flesh that will want to pollute it and make it sinful. As soon as you determine, Christian, that you want your love to be patient and kind, your flesh is going to rise up in you to say, don't do that. Paul then, knowing that our flesh will go negative, goes ahead and lays out what love is not. Secondly, why he goes negative, he's also probably bringing up things that were directly being done by the Corinth church. What were the Corinthian Christians doing themselves? In other words, it's Paul saying, you guys are acting like this, but the way you're acting is not a description of love. Love is not how you're acting, and here's how you're acting. So Paul goes negative for two reasons. He knows the battle and the struggle that Christians deal with, and as soon as we attempt in our spirit to live out love as God wants us to, our flesh is going to go negative. Second, he probably knows what's actually occurring and being done in the Corinthian church. What are things they're actually doing? And he wants to address, love is not this that you're doing. We're just going to look at two tonight. First, love does not envy. Now, we don't use the word envy very often. It's not a word that is used today so much, but we do use the word jealousy. Jealousy was considered so detrimental to a person that Shakespeare called it the green sickness. Green with envy. Have you ever heard that phrase before? It has also been called the enemy of honor, the sorrow of a fool, and Jesus referred to it as an evil eye. The Corinthian church was being eaten away by the destructive power of envy and jealousy. Paul has already told them in chapter 3, verse 3 of 1 Corinthians, he's already said that there was jealousy and quarreling, and it showed in the way that they were acting toward one another. And he says, when you act that way, you're acting like the world. When you act in envy and jealousy, you are acting the way the world acts, and he knows the Corinthian church is struggling with this. They are being eaten alive by envy. Now, jealousy takes on two forms. Two forms that jealousy takes on. Number one, when you want something someone else has simply because you think it's not fair that they have it and you don't. Jealousy takes this form where you see what somebody else has got and you want it simply because they have it and you don't. You don't think it's fair. And what will happen is it will be associated with bitterness toward the person who has it because you don't. When you get jealous of something that somebody else has that you don't have and you want it because it's not fair, inevitably that's going to be mixed with bitterness that you will often put into play against that person. One sign of a loving Christian friend is that they are excited when you get blessings and rewards and favor by God thrown your way. A sign of a good friend is when that person can be happy when they get something that you don't, and you're thrilled that your friend gets it. There's also another form of jealousy. It's when someone has something that you don't. You get bitter and you don't think it's fair. But instead of wanting what they have, you simply desire that they lose what they have to even the playing field. So the second is not just selfish, it is wishing evil or harm to somebody else. So the first way that jealousy plays out is, this person has this thing and I want this thing too. It's not fair that they have it and I don't have it, so I want it. The other way jealousy plays out is the same thing. You look at it, you're saying, that's not fair. They have this thing, I don't have this thing. But you go a step further, not just I wish I had it, I wish they didn't have it. I want what they have taken away. Therefore, desiring harm upon the person that you're jealous of. The word envy here in verse 4. Love is patient and kind. Love does not envy. Implies a strong desire for. It is where we get our term zeal. But here it is negative and sinful. Do you know that desire is a beautiful thing? Right? Desire is a beautiful thing. God gave us desire. But desire can also be a terrible thing. Here, this word envy implies this desire for something, this zeal for something, but here it's in the negative sense. The Corinthians were probably jealous that some Christians were getting gifts of God that they weren't getting. Remember, this is being sandwiched in between chapter 12 and 14, which is all about spiritual gifts. The Corinthians probably were being envious of spiritual gifts. Think about that. God is giving this person the ability to do this well, and I'm jealous that I don't have what they have. Even though God is giving me gifts, even though God is blessing me with spiritual gifts, I'm envious that I don't have the spiritual gift that they have. So I either want that spiritual gift or I don't want them to have it. The Corinthians were dealing with this. Biblical love, however, sees someone with gifts, talents, physical blessings, and instead of getting jealous, they are glad that the Lord has blessed others. I want to point out something. This is so important. Jealousy is directly related to contentment. Write that down right now. Write that down. Jealousy is directly related to contentment. If you are not content with where God has you, you are not content with what God is doing in your life, if you are not content with the gifts and the blessings that you have, you will become jealous of other people. And jealousy will destroy you. It will ruin your life. You will begin comparing yourself to people, and inevitably you will compare yourself to people and be jealous of what they have, and you'll ruin yourself. It will ruin love. There is always someone who's better than you. Listen to me. I don't care what it is. There is someone who is better than you at that thing. The few people on the planet that can actually say, I'm the best in the world at this, is so minute and tiny. And you ain't one of them. You ain't one of them. I'm not one of them. There's always someone who has it better than you. They're better than you at stuff. They have it better than you. They've got more money. They've got the marriage that you want. They've got the relationship they want. They've got the car you want. They've got the school you want. They've got the talent you want. There's always someone who's got it better than you. And it is not loving for you to look at others in that light. Instead, if you love them, you would be happy for what they have, happy for what God has given them. And you will hope and pray for them that they will use what God has given them for God's glory. I want to read you two verses. Proverbs 27:4, you have this in your notes. Proverbs 27:4, wrath is cruel and anger is overwhelming, but who can stand before jealousy? Listen to that. Wrath is cruel. Wrath's a bad thing. You don't want to stand in somebody's wrath. Anger is overwhelming. You don't want to deal with somebody's anger. But jealousy, who can stand before that? James chapter 3, verse 16. Where jealousy and selfish ambition exists, there will be disorder and every vile practice. What does jealousy lead to? Every vile practice. Is envy some small sin, some small thing. Envy murdered Abel, Genesis 4. Envy enslaved Joseph, Genesis 37. Envy put Jesus on the cross, Matthew 27. We could go on and on and on. In contrast to jealousy, we have the love of this beautiful couple, Jonathan and David. Jonathan and David, this beautiful relationship between these two young men who wanted nothing but the best for each other. Listen to this. Jonathan was supposed to be the next king. His dad screws up, not him. His dad screws up. God takes the kingdom away from Jonathan, gives it to David, Jonathan's best friend. And you know what Jonathan does? He risks his own life for David's good. When he could have been eaten up with jealousy and bitterness and envy and looking at David and said, he's going to get what I should get. Instead of that, he risked his life and he lays it all on the line because of love for his best friend. The Bible says in 1 Samuel chapter 20, Jonathan loved David as he loved his own life. He had every human reason to be jealous of David, but he wasn't. Love does not envy. Second negative is when a loving person is successful or blessed or gifted, they don't boast about it. Love does not boast. This word is only used here in the entire New Testament. It means to heap praise upon oneself. Bragging is the other side of jealousy. Jealousy is wanting what someone else has. Bragging is trying to make others jealous of what you have. Jealousy puts others down. Boasting builds you up. So I'm going to brag about what I have. I'm going to boast about what I have to push you down and to make you jealous of what I have, which will then in turn ruin you, and then you'll try to ruin me. This needs to be distinguished, however, from someone being excited and sharing the goodness of God. It doesn't mean you're bragging because you share what God has done in your life. Also, spiritually good things that others should pursue if they're following Christ. There's nothing wrong with saying this person is following Christ and they have contentment and peace. I want to follow Christ like that, so I have contentment and peace. So I'm distinguishing those kind of proper boasting in the Lord and boasting in the goodness of God and bragging about what I have to make others feel bad. The Corinthian believers were spiritual show-offs, constantly vying for public attention. Do you know what gift? The Corinthians wanted the most? Speaking in tongues. Why? Because that would look the best. Man, if I can speak in tongues, everyone will see me and they'll think how spiritual I am and that God's doing this thing in me and not in them. And they wanted this thing so bad so they could be spiritual show-offs. They wanted more prestige. They wanted more glamorous gifts. They were elevating themselves above other people. Bragging becomes about wanting the applause of man rather than the applause of God. Take a note, write that down. Bragging will become living for the applause of man rather than living for the applause of God. Several years ago, the Seattle Seahawks were in the NFC Championship game, and they were led by their quarterback, Russell Wilson, a professing believer. And he tweeted before the NFC Championship game that morning, blessed to wake up and play for an audience of one. Then he put, Jesus is good all the time. So here he is with 67,000 fans cheering for him. And his main concern is, am I playing this sport for the applause of God? I wrote down a dumb joke. While Lady Gaga lives for the applause, true love does not. I'm going to put LOL after it. I live for the applause. You know what I'm talking about?
The first time you did this, it's when she just came out with that song.
Yeah.
You said that in the back.
Yeah. I had it in there and I was like, there is one kind of boasting, however, that we are allowed to do. And I've already mentioned it. Paul talks about it in his second letter to the Corinthians when he says this in 2 Corinthians 11:30. If I must boast, if I gotta boast, if I can't not help but boast, I will boast only of those things that show my weakness. Whoa, what? That doesn't make any sense. I'm going to boast about my weaknesses? I'm going to boast about the things that show me as weak? Why? Why would Paul say that? Why would Paul say, if I've got to boast, I mean, if there's just something in me that's got to boast, I want to boast about the things in my life that show my weakness. Here's why. Because boasting in his weakness was boasting in the strength of the Lord. I'm going to boast in my weakness so that God's strength shines through. Boasting in the power of the cross to save us and use me in my weakness. Any other kind of bragging hurts others and is not characteristic of love. Listen, so often love works anonymously. Love works anonymously. It's going to love, it's going to do something, and no one else is going to know it except maybe that person you did it for. And you're not going to stand there and want everybody else to applaud you for loving them. C.S. Lewis called bragging the utmost evil, for when we brag, we are up only if others are down. It's a great quote. Bragging is the utmost evil, for when we brag, we are up only if others are down. Listen to me, guys. Love is not about you. It's about others. And as long as you are envious and boasting, then you're making it about you and you're not loving other people. Those who go around envious and boasting are miserable. Listen to me. If you let envy take root in your life and you let boasting become a characteristic of life, it is going to make you miserable, which is exactly what those who are not loving are. Miserable. People who are not loving are miserable people. And they make everybody else around them miserable. Love is not envious. Love does not boast. Love is not jealous. Love does not brag.